this is probably the single most contentious issue that motorists have with cyclists. But could a change in the law help bring a bit of harmony between the two groups? Good morning and welcome to what is a quite cold but also incredibly foggy ride. It is soup of the pea variety, I think you would say, this morning. We've been out for a good 10 miles so far, just taking on a new route this morning actually, chewing the fat and just, as ever, having a decent chat with all the lads, which is why I'm only just recording now. But it is incredibly moist this morning. My jersey, as you can probably tell, is a little bit wet, so I should have probably worn my rain jacket this morning, but I looked out, saw that it wasn't raining, and saw in the forecast that it wasn't going to rain. In fact, it's supposed to brighten up a little bit in a couple of hours, and I thought, nah, I'll leave it. Yeah, that was probably a bad idea. But that aside, I'm going to get straight into the topic of conversation that I wanted to talk to you about the other day, because I saw an article the other day that was talking about cyclists going through red lights and stop signs, and it was mainly referring to doing those things in North America, in the US and Canada. But just reflecting back on the video I put out a few weeks ago as to why motorists hate cyclists, that does seem to be the single biggest issue that motorists have against cyclists, is the fact that a lot of them go through red lights. As I said in that video, a lot of motorists also go through red lights, but cyclists doing it does seem to infuriate motorists more than anything else. But there does seem to be a growing movement, especially on the other side of the pond, but even in parts of Europe, suggesting that cyclists should be allowed to go through stop signs without stopping and disregard red traffic lights as well. So I wanted to have a chat with you about that and how that might actually look and work if we were to adopt that in the UK. But I need to get to the top of this hill first. Right, well, with that out of the way, I do want to acknowledge how frustrating it can be for motorists sat at red traffic lights to watch a cyclist come up behind you and then breeze straight through a red light. I do get it, because if a motorist were to do the same thing, there's a chance that they could get fined or even prosecuted for it, whereas a cyclist apparently gets away with it scot-free, and that can look like arrogance. However, you have to consider that a bike moves completely differently through the world than a car does. A car weighs over a ton, and if that were to run through a red stoplight, well, then it could do a fairly decent amount of damage or injury to someone. A 9-kilogram bike with an around 80-kilo rider on the back of it doing 5 to 10 miles an hour through a stoplight, yeah, not so much. Yet the law treats them exactly the same, as if a carbon fibre road bike and a Range Rover are equal in danger, braking distance and effort. That's not equality, that's deceptive equality. And that's why some people believe that it doesn't make sense for cyclists to stop at every stop sign and every red light. Because let's think about the mechanics of cycling. You generate every little bit of movement yourself. So every time you come to a stop sign or a red light, you have to stop and then build that momentum back up again. It's obviously not as simple as just putting your foot on a pedal and cruising away. Now imagine you're riding through a town or a city on your way to work, and you have to stop at 15 or 20 sets of traffic lights before you get there, stopping at every single one of them and then having to build that speed back up again, only to get a couple of 100 meters down the road and have to stop again. It could be argued that that is completely unnecessary, especially when you can see the junction is clear. Now, I don't commute to London that often at all, but when I do make sure to stop at all the red traffic lights, because while driving standards in London have improved markedly over the last 10 years, there are still drivers out there that simply don't look. So going through red lights, for me personally, is just too much of a risk. But as sitting at the traffic lights, I do notice a number of cyclists that do slowly go through the red lights, checking all around them as they go. Now, I'm not going to condone that, but I can't exactly condemn it either. And that's sort of backed up by the fact that there's new research from Canada that suggests that constant start-stop and actually not being able to get much momentum puts a lot of people off cycling completely, which obviously creates issues for health, congestion and pollution, because obviously with more people cycling and less people driving, all of those things are improved. In other words, applying car logic to bikes ends up favouring cars. It's like forcing a pedestrian to wait for a green light on an empty path. With all that in mind, I was interested to discover that back in the early 80s, the state of Idaho in the United States did something very different. They changed the law so that cyclists could treat a stop sign as a give way, or a yield as they call it in America, and a red light as a stop sign. That means as a cyclist you still have to slow down and give priority to motorists already in the junction and pedestrians crossing. But if the junction's clear, you can make your own judgment call as to whether it's safe to cross. And just seeing that model that someone's put up outside their house with a high-vis jacket and a hairdryer that looks like a speed gun, it does rather beg the question, in little towns and villages like this in Essex, are speeding motorists more of a problem than cyclists going through red lights? Since then, other states like Arkansas, Oregon and Colorado have changed their laws to follow suit, and even parts of France and Belgium. Now, if those two great European cycling nations have decided to change the way their laws work towards cyclists, well then we should really start to take notice. And now I know what some of you are thinking, and it's that, well, that is clearly going to increase the amount of accidents that happen. But here's the kicker, because not only does evidence say that where these laws have been changed, accidents haven't gone up, in some places they've actually gone down. How is that possible, I hear you ask? Well, it's chiefly been put down to the fact that cyclists are not spending as long in the junction. They're not having to slow down, stop at the lights and then move away slowly, so they're spending much less time in the danger zone. So when you look at it like that, it's not chaos, it's common sense. So that's how it's worked across the pond and in parts of Europe. But how could it work here in the UK? Well, we've already adapted parts of our highway code to give a little bit of flexibility to cyclists already, by allowing cyclists to take a primary position at junctions to be a bit more visible and to give them a little more priority on the roads. And that was all done because cyclists are the more vulnerable road user between cars and bikes. So we've already proved that we can adapt our laws a little bit to align with each mode of transport's reality. The logic is the same then. You get the rules adapted for the reality of your vulnerability. And it's no difference to pedestrians, who are the most vulnerable, getting more priority when doing things such as crossing the road. So let's be honest, if we're serious about encouraging active travel, which reduces pollution, reduces congestion and improves overall health, then why wouldn't we look to adopt certain laws that encourages all three of those? And to the motorists, I'll say this: the more people that are commuting by bike means there's less people in cars causing traffic jams, meaning even you get to move faster as well. It's a win-win, surely.
When I used to ride in London regularly, often the people that jump the red lights tended to be the slowest cyclists, but not that speed is necessarily the object, but you would see them weave through the people waiting, and then they'd jump the light. When we went down to the next light, everyone would overtake them again, and then they'd weave through. And one morning, there was one particular guy, no helmet on, but Beats headphones on. He rode through us all, and then we all overtook him again when we were going over Blackfriars Bridge. And at the first set of lights heading south over Blackfriars Bridge, he weaved through everybody again, knocking into people, and then went through the red light. And then when we got down to the TfL building near Southwark Tube, there were some police outside, and he went through the red light and they stopped him. And they said, well, what are you doing? You've just gone through a red light. And he didn't have an answer for it. And then the policeman said, look, it's not a legal requirement, but riding in London, I'd recommend that you wear a helmet. And he said, oh, I can't afford a helmet, mate. And I looked at him and thought, your headphones are 300 quid. And that tends to be the experience I've had of those that regularly jump lights in London. Thank you very much.
Well, there's a number of points raised there by Simo, chief of which is probably what the experience of most motorists are, which is the arrogance and entitlement of most cyclists. We're not all like that, I promise. But what's your experience of that? Have you noticed that it is the slower cyclists that are the ones that tend to go through the lights more than others? Let me know in the comments below. But back on with the video. In truth, most cyclists do already do a soft stop at a red light or a stop sign. In fact, studies have shown that just 27% of cyclists come to a complete stop at a stop sign. This is in North America. But what about the motorists? Well, only 35% of them did as well, so it's already clear that there is a bending of rules by both groups. The only difference is that with cyclists, it's almost always harmless.
Is there any stats, Peter, for how many cyclists jump a red light, not due to any desire to get ahead of the traffic, but mainly due to the crushing disappointment of not being able to execute the track stand? Guilty as charged.
As a member of the cycling community who is very good at track standing, I couldn't say. Unfortunately, it seems that Simo is less adept at track standing. Here's the problem though. For decades, our road traffic laws have been skewed towards motorists. That changes how people think and how people feel about their position on the road in the hierarchy. Now, I already mentioned this in my video a few weeks ago where I said that motorists tend to have this sense of social hierarchy that they think they're at the top of the pecking order for. A lot of motorists consider cyclists to be a nuisance or a threat to their position on their road, but it's the complete opposite. It's cars that are the structural hazard on a road. As cars have got bigger over the years, especially in America with the SUVs and the pickup trucks, it's cyclists and pedestrians that have been put at the most risk. So adopting laws like the Idaho stop isn't about giving cyclists special treatment, it's about recognising the reality of different road users and that cars and bikes are fundamentally different machines with different levels of risk. So my question to you is, should the UK adopt Idaho stop laws? To me, I have to say that having read up quite a bit about it now and looking at the evidence, it does seem to make sense, as much as that might enrage other motorists, although I know a lot of people will see it as unnecessary and unfair. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Should cyclists be able to just roll through red lights and stop signs, or should we all play by the same rules, even if it doesn't really make sense? Sound off in the comments, but otherwise, thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, ride safe.